Once again, Tess and I find ourselves on a train trip, this time from Thessaloniki to the village of Kalabaka in central Greece. Join us as we visit the popular region of Meteora and the obscure Christian history of its monasteries in the sky. Right after this. Tess and I arrived at the Thessaloniki station for a morning departure. Be at the station early. In our experience, the trains in Greece both leave and arrive according to schedule. Remember that if you miss your first train, you will probably miss your connections. I may have been a little hasty in saying that all the trains depart and arrive on time. We are currently stuck in Pharsalos, which doesn't have a whole lot of city to see, so we'll be here for a little while until we get to Meteora. Apparently, a connection at an isolated station may be canceled or delayed if the number of transferring passengers is too low. We had to wait an extra hour, but at least we had some interesting local entertainment. We were eventually on the move again and arrived safely at Kalabaka. This area is called Meteora, which literally means suspended in the air, indicative of the landscape and monasteries rather than a particular village. It is a unique geographical region where God created magnificent cliffs and stone pillars. Located on the northwest rim of the plain of Thessaly in central Greece, the region was largely isolated from tourism in the past. Visitors much prefer the idyllic Greek islands and the historic, cultural, and biblical centers such as Athens and Thessaloniki. These are still the primary tourism spots, but Meteora has been gaining prominence as a must-see destination, and its popularity significantly increased after the release of the James Bond film For Your Eyes Only, which featured the Holy Trinity Monastery.
My friend, I've been studying this place for years for just such an occasion. We'll split here, huh? Your best approach will be on the right face, which is away from the buildings. Good luck.
Suddenly, the monasteries perched atop great sandstone pillars were on the map. But you can be assured that none of them are the fortified lairs of supervillains. Rather, they are among the last remaining refuges of ascetic monasticism in obscure Christian history. Ascetic monasticism? What? To understand asceticism in the Church, we need to go back to the end of the 2nd century AD during a time of great persecution of Christians. One of the centers of Christianity at that time was the Patriarchate of Alexandria in Egypt, and persecution was as prevalent there as it was in the rest of the Roman Empire. Under Emperor Commodus's rule in 190 AD, a number of believers became convinced that God wanted them to live in isolation in the Cetis Desert, some 40 miles from Cairo. It is from the name of this desert that we now have the word asceticism. One might rightly question whether their decision to live a hermit's life was based upon spiritual conviction or from fear for their mortal lives. But the trend towards ascetic isolation from worldly pleasures continued to grow in popularity, even after Christianity was legalized. And that brings us to Meteora in Greece. The cliffs, reaching high into the sky, contain many caves which were attractive to hermits. In the 9th century, more and more devotees began climbing and building scaffolds to reach their new living quarters. Some of the scaffolding from later centuries can still be seen at the caves accessible by hiking trails. It is hard to imagine, with all the advanced equipment available to rock climbers today, that the religious devotees of the ancient world could ascend cliffs and build their dwellings without modern aids. Yet they did. And they relied upon other Christians living in the villages below to provide them with food and other necessities which they raised to themselves on ropes. But even the most ardent had a natural need for fellowship. Many would leave their caves on Sunday to worship at the Church of the Assumption of Virgin Mary, which pre-existed the arrival of the first hermits. This Byzantine church is a worthwhile visit when in Kalabaka, as it retains an interior remarkably similar to its appearance in the 11th century, as though you were stepping back in time. Monasteries had long existed in the Byzantine Empire, so it was not unusual that these communities of hermits in Meteora would want to build their own. But what is unusual was the amount of physical danger and tremendous hardships they underwent in order to construct their refuges in such hazardous locations.
Tess and I are at the Monastery of St. Stephen's. It is one of 6 in Meteora, and this is the only one that is occupied by a contingent of nuns. At one point, 41 monasteries occupied this area. Of course, there was a lot of difficulties with the economy of the region going down around the 16th and 17th century, so that it could not support so many monasteries. Now there is only 6.
The monasteries are now connected by a modern circuit road. Most can be accessed through small bridges and long stone staircases, but these are modern improvements. In the not-so-distant past, they were reachable only by the extraordinary means under which they were built in order to guarantee solitude. Imagine the difficulties of building atop a pillar where every piece of wood and other materials would have to be carried or lifted to the construction site. How many years of labor it would require to complete such a project, and how much ongoing work would be needed to sustain the community. Only unwavering devotion and discipline could accomplish this. Of course, the concept of discipline can be taken to extremes, beyond isolation or self-imposed silence. Some, in seeking holiness, would starve themselves to dangerous levels or regularly engage in self-flagellation. This means of mortifying the flesh was initially meant to be practiced privately, but like so many other acts of humility, they could lead to public demonstrations of self-righteousness. Jesus warned his disciples against engaging in such performances. He told them, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward." The Dark Ages and the Middle Ages that followed saw an increase in public flagellation as a form of penance. During the Black Death Plague, groups of flagellants would walk from village to village beating themselves bloody, supposedly in an effort to stop God's judgment. It didn't work. The plague continued until it burned itself out. Yet, such public displays are performed even in our own time. Whatever we might think of the ascetics, it is hard to argue against their devotion. But personally, I would rather have my sins forgiven by grace through faith, washed away by the pure blood of Jesus Christ shed for me, than to try to earn forgiveness by shedding my own impure blood in a fruitless attempt to cleanse myself. At least as a monastic, one could practice holiness outside of the public eye. But how then could they let their light shine before others, as Jesus also commanded his apostles, so that the world might see their good works and glorify their Father in heaven? It seems to be a dilemma. The answer is the attitude of one's heart. Wrong motives, self-glory, and hypocrisy are condemned. Good works done in humility for God's glory are expected. The question is whether monastic isolation fulfills both of Christ's commands.
Let me be clear that I'm not criticizing monasticism as a whole. It's a great thing to set oneself aside for prayer and dedication, study of the Word. Those are wonderful things that we ought to be doing. The question really is whether you isolate yourself from the world. To me, that doesn't go along with the great commission that Jesus gave, to go into the world and make disciples. It starts with a command to action, to go. And you can't do that if you're just locking yourself away in a monastery.
St. Stephen's, the most visible monastery from Kalabaka, is perhaps more easily toured by those with physical challenges. The other monasteries can be difficult. So, if the idea of climbing up and down 300 stone steps doesn't appeal to you for mortifying your flesh, choose St. Stephen's. The few steps are manageable, and you will be greeted by ancient stone structures, a well-maintained pleasant garden, and the best view of Kalabaka below. A small admission fee gives access to the chapel and a treasury museum on site. Within the monastery's treasury, you will find sacred objects going back many centuries, priestly garments, tapestries, and some of the oldest Bibles in Christendom. The monasteries can be reached through bus tours from Kalabaka, but we chose to hire a taxi. This allowed us to take our time and visit locations meeting our interests. Plus, we had a personal tour guide who was willing to take photographs.
Yeah.
My name Vasily, taxi driver, Kalabaka Meteora.
Okay. So if you come around, ask for Vasily.
Following your tours, you will undoubtedly have worked up an appetite. Tess and I thoroughly enjoyed our meals in Kalabaka.
It is evening, and this is our dinner. On the right, we have lamb in wine sauce, and on the left, ratatouille, a vegetable dish with eggplant. This is the Meteora salad. It consists of lettuce, apple, plum, cranberry, sesame seed, and special house dressing. Well, we have completed another successful meal, now in Meteora. And the food has always been great here in Greece. One comment I would make, if you are used to having your vegetables al dente, you can forget it here. It seems like we've been to about 3 or 4 really nice restaurants, and the vegetables always seem overcooked. but they're delicious, lots of flavor. And another thing you'll discover when you come to Greece, when you eat at a restaurant, quite often they bring you free appetizers or a free dessert at the end. In this case, we have some free watermelon. So enjoy.
An after-dinner stroll will allow for souvenir shopping while you digest your food and the local culture. Tess and I were blessed to be able to visit this fascinating region of Greece, but we would not suggest asceticism as a life choice. It is praiseworthy to lay up spiritual treasures in heaven rather than place our trust in earthly riches. But we are also told that God provides all things for us to enjoy, if received with gratitude while honoring Him. Not everything that is good or enjoyable is evil, and those desires of the flesh that can be turned to evil are not eliminated merely through our own self-imposed restrictions. We need God's help to be in the world, but not of the world.
The Bible does not tell us to isolate ourselves, to punish ourselves. Listen, the world is going to have plenty of opportunities to punish and persecute us. We've been promised that by Jesus. So we don't need to be punishing ourselves. We need to be living for Christ. And if you live for Christ, you will not satisfy the desires of the flesh.
As a beautiful sunset ends our visit to Meteora and our series of videos in Greece, we invite you to subscribe. Click the notification bell. God willing, more obscure Christian history will follow. May God bless.